Hello, I'm Shiloh, and today I would like to share with you a chapter from my first novel, The Magician. So, get comfortable, take my hand, and together, let's enter Jan's magical garden, where her mystical wisdom will take us on a blessed journey. Tales from the Deck Trilogy, The Magician, Book 1, Soul's Journey. The childhood that many of us endured was sometimes arduous, even grueling for some. Difficult experiences have a way to shape our personalities, but they also help us reveal the template we later express in adulthood. The erroneous beliefs we pick up along the way, the deeply imprinted memories, all of it can become the icebergs of our future. But it doesn't have to be that way. Jan was my mentor and my best friend. She taught me everything I know. She believed in reincarnation and practiced magic as an art. With her, I discovered that before we take on a new life journey, when we are just a spark of light floating in the ethers, we choose our parents, our gender, and our nationality, as well as our physical traits. Most significantly, she taught me that we are the artisans of our destiny, of all our lives' circumstances. That idea used to drive me crazy when I was younger, because if indeed life is scripted, already preordained by us before we appear in the flesh, then I wondered why. Why in the universe would I, not yet emergent from my cosmic yoke, choose to be born and become an orphan? What a folly is it to start a new life only to endure pain and sorrow? If I could really choose my own destiny, it just didn't make any sense. Later, in my training, Jeanne added to her teachings a mixture of confusing notions: free will versus fate, karma, and past lives. What a cosmic stew! A real bouillabaisse de Marseille, if you ask me. My chosen path of unceasing inquiry and my constant pursuit to understand this world was arduous and very lonely. I couldn't help but wonder if indeed I was such an amazingly powerful being, filled with the knowledge and experiences of hundreds of past lives. Why couldn't I remember any of them? With this immense kind of wisdom at my disposal, this time around, shouldn't I be able to find a cure for all disease, put an end to war, poverty, and all famines forever? With such a genius mind at my disposal, I should be capable of imagining and creating the maximum level of comfort and technology for the entire planet. That would be my idea of a life well spent. Early in my life, I realized that the religious teachings I received in Catholic school didn't match my understanding of the universe and our place in it. Neither did they match what I witnessed going on around me. Nothing felt true to me. And by the age of 10, I had already formed deeply skeptical views about religion, politics, and dogma, and I stood my ground whenever an adult contradicted me. With Jeanne, I developed a deep fascination for esoteric and ancient teachings. And with great reverence, I studied the sacred and mystical texts of the Zohar, the Kabbalion, and other mystical precepts in the Book of Radiance. The Kabbalah and the Hermetic laws became my creed, and by the time I was 10, under Jeanne's tutelage, I meditated for an hour each day. By then, I had acquired a solid understanding of the necessary steps of alchemy as outlined by Nicolas Flamel. The immortal French alchemist had paved the way for those of us who sought to understand the metaphorical depth of turning the base metal of the soul into gold. Jeanne helped me develop my psychic abilities. We worked incessantly with the vibrations of numbers and colors and the healing qualities of plants. With a little persuasion from Jeanne, my adoring grandfather, who was a most charming free thinker, mad chemist, and absolute atheist, secretly provided me with an endless supply of books on magic, fortune-telling, spells, and other mystical subjects, all to the great consternation of my very devout Catholic grandmother. I still smile when I recall my grandmother's fearful glare and her pious gestures at the sight of my dangerous, blasphemous books and tarot cards. Not too far from my house, there was a small enchanted meadow, at the rear of which stood Jeanne's small home, called a roulotte. She had refused to remove the wheels of her little trailer when my uncle had rented her a small plot of land and installed the necessary water line and electrical cables. She was hopeful that once again someday she would rejoin her family of gypsies on the road. But nestled there, surrounded by a thick forest of oak and dark green pines, she had found her magical place. Her world captured my nascent imagination. In her garden, we played endlessly amongst the vines and the wildflowers. Just as I had, stray cats and dogs from all over the countryside seemed to find their way there. And despite her sparse means, Jeanne nurtured and loved any of the creatures that had found refuge in her modest quarters. I didn't know then that Jeanne had breast cancer and had refused any medical treatment a year earlier. She had decided that her life had been good and full enough. She was completely at peace with the inevitable. She shared freely with me her thoughts and emotions about leaving our world behind. But before passing, she was able to teach me everything she knew about the metaphysical arts. She loved me like a mother, and I loved her back with all of my little heart. She was extremely proud of my strength and of my curious mind, and she loved showing me off, always taking me along when her fellow gypsies arrived in town for a visit. Originally from Armenia, her entire family had emigrated from country to country for many years. They had been forced to flee from Lebanon and then Italy until they had finally found refuge and peace in my hometown in France. That's also where she had met her beloved husband, Fernand, who had passed away years before I met her. During and after World War II, most gypsies sought refuge wherever they could. Hitler had killed them by the thousands as part of his final solution. They had kept their nomadic ways of life and traveled from village to village in their roulottes and wagons or on horseback. They seemed to follow a specific route each year, and they always arrived in my town on their way to the south of France around mid-July. There, they joined hundreds of other gypsies in Camargue for the Sainte Marie celebrations. They would stay in the south by the Mediterranean shores until the following spring. Then they would migrate back to the northern part of Europe. They always set their camp on the outskirts of my town, away from everyone. At night, a great communal bonfire would illuminate their camp, and they would sing and dance long into the night. The men repaired copper pots for the restaurant's kitchens and provided seasonal labor to the farmers and the small business owners. The women made their way through the town, reading palms and telling fortunes for 2 francs per person. Many villagers were afraid of them and even went out of their way to avoid them. Supposedly, they had the reputation of being thieves. I recall the adults in town calling them the Bohemia or the Manouche. Often, the neighbors would make snide jokes about counting their chickens before the troop had left the village. It took much convincing for my grandmother to allow me to participate in their festivities. But, with the blessing of my grandfather, I sat around the fire with Jeanne and listened, fascinated by the extraordinary stories they told. I used to think of them as exotic migratory birds, and I dreamt about following them on their voyage. Later, in my 20s, I was able to join some of Jeanne's relatives during these festivities in Camargue, and I listened, mesmerized, to Manitas de Plata, an incredibly talented flamenco guitarist there, Each night, he performed on a beach beside a wild bonfire to the great delight of all of us. I was young and boisterous, filled with curiosity for Jeanne's mysteries and the stories of her exotic clan of beautiful, swarthy-faced nomads and her spooky tarot séance. All of it mesmerized me. I felt so lucky to have her, to love and to be loved by her. Each day, she would tenderly and gently say in my ears, "You are a spark of the divine, of our source. Remember, Shiloh, always." Like the other women, in addition to reading palms, Jeanne also read tea leaves and her favorite, the tarot. She prepared candles and potions for sale. She had many clients, mostly women. The young women were especially desperate for answers about their love lives. Sometimes it was about their finances or their health, or the number of children they were going to have. Jeanne's serene but knowing presence and earthy wisdom calmed their frantic souls, reassured the credulous, and injected hope in the desperate. I was only 6 when I met Jeanne. I used to sit in a corner of her small house playing with her pet turtles, but mainly I was paying close attention to the séances she held for her clients. Her magic tarot chamber, as she named it, was dark and filled with unusual scents and perfumes. A small window facing north, covered with dark red drapes, allowed just a sliver of light to illuminate the room. Jeanne prepared for her readings around a small table draped in red velvet also. She had accumulated many different tarot decks, crystals, and mysterious-looking figurines during her lifetime. But every item in the room had a purpose in setting the tone for this mysterious and solemn occasion. I studied her facial expressions as she would start a séance. She always began by closing her eyes and saying a prayer. Then she would take 3 deep breaths and ask permission to join a group of beings she called her patrons. These were the angelic beings that protected her and that only she could see and feel. Then she would enter a light trance and breathe in a rhythmical pattern. For the longest time, I really just thought that she was a master of hocus pocus. Much like what you thought, Michael, when you first met me. I must admit that sometimes during her séances, Jeanne delivered a highly theatrical and sophisticated performance of nonsensical gestures aimed at rendering her work more believable. Sometimes I hid my laughter in the sleeve of my shirt, embarrassed and thinking, "Oh no, here she goes again." But I found out later that I was wrong to question her theatrics. Yes, as I progressed in my studies, I understood and respected the importance of the theatrics of her work. Jeanne would often say to me, "You see, child, I really don't need any of this tralala, but my clients, well, they do." She had a tremendous amount of respect and compassion for her visitors and said, "Always remember, Shiloh, there are no coincidences, not ever. Source only works on a need-to-know basis and divine timing. Oh yes, divine timing. So always honor the seekers and help them to the best of your abilities." Often, she looked troubled reading her cards, and sometimes she convinced a woman to see her doctor. At other times, she revealed the sex of a child to an expectant mother. Sometimes, she declared the outcome of a legal dispute. Her discreet clients came back often and always left their sessions empowered and comforted. Many years later now, and with many readings to my credit, I still smell the aromatic fragrances of the wisteria vines in her garden, and I see, just like yesterday, Jeanne sitting in her parlor, casting spells and divining the unseen or the not yet known. As I read these words to you, I am once more at play in a magical garden where I spent most of my glorious childhood and where I cherished the loving days of my summers with Jeanne. Surrounded by her dogs, cats, turtles, wildflowers and vines. Jeanne lives in my heart. Yes, she's with me, always and forever.